Hi, my name is Charlie McGrath. I'm the founder of wideawakenews.com and a host on the Rinse Radio Network. This video is going to be a bit different than what you're used to if you're joined this channel since the days of 5-minute to 6-minute, sometimes shorter commentary videos. This is going to be more of a story, more of a warning, and more of a plea from me, from this channel, from Wide Awake News, to think about what you are getting yourself into, or in some cases, letting your children get involved in. But first, I'm going to start it with a story. And look, guys, if you don't like long videos, personal stories, this is probably the time to go ahead and click off of this, because it's not going to be the quick rant. Although there will be some ranting in it, I'm more than sure. I have nothing written down. I have nothing that I'm, reading off of. As in most of my videos, it's just some bullet points that I talk about. I don't even have that in this one. This is just a story. This is a story of one Gulf War veteran, myself, and what I have gone through in the last almost 3 years, and suggestions for those who are in the same boat, and a promise that I will absolutely document my procedures and my path going forward in dealing with our government on these issues that I'm bringing to their attention, because it's physically happening to myself. A lot of you know that follow the channel, follow YouTube's Krabby Dog Tricks and Wide Awake News, that I'm a Gulf War veteran. I spent approximately a year in that theater of operations, slightly less. Uh, Most of my time was spent pre-land war on the border of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. I was in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, for those of you who want to look that up to hear the validity of locations and where we were and what we did. When the air war came to an end, we were the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, part of 7th Corps, deployed out of Germany. We were the first units that crossed the berm into Iraq and started taking prisoners, killing people, being shot at. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It began with 7th Corps invading Iraq, pincer move from Iraq, or from, excuse me, Saudi Arabia into Iraq, bootlegging into Kuwait. That was the battle plan. Before, in that time, long time, waiting time out in the desert, uh, several things happened out there that were very unusual. First and foremost, the botulism and anthrax vaccines were given to us. Now, I've researched reports all the way from the 90s to current, and they all vary in the procedure. Some say it was voluntary, some say it was mandatory, some say if you didn't do it, you would be court-martialed. So I can't speak to all of them, because I can only tell you what happened to me and what happened to the men that I served with. We were given the choice: take this vaccine or face the horror of dying in very, very horrific ways. Dying of anthrax or botulism, it's a pretty easy sell on a 19, 20-year-old kid when you're telling him how it's going to be the most grotesque, painful death you can imagine. It's a pretty easy sell to get them to line up out in the middle of the desert on the side of Humvees and wait in line to get a needle shoved into your arm. You don't think about what's happening further down the road. You don't think about what it means that when your first sergeant, who, let's face it, a first sergeant is not the bastion of knowledge when it comes to the effects of what these experimental drugs are going to do to you. He's got a line he's got to deliver that came from somebody that was an officer above him, that came from somebody that was above them, that came from somebody at the Pentagon, that came from who knows where, a pharmaceutical industry, the promise of the expansion of the knowledge of what's going to happen with anthrax and botulism, arguably a lot of which the Iraqis had that was provided by this very same government. But when you filter it down to the bottom line, the guys who were standing there in the desert facing the choice to take it or not, I never knew anybody in my unit that refused the shot, barely questioned the shot. It was a no-brainer, as it was pointed out to us then. Very odd, because we could have been inoculated with a vaccine in Germany, in Nuremberg, where we deployed out of, because that's where the vast majority of the shots that we were given to fly to a different nation, a different country, a different region of the world. For those of you in the military, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get a whole slew of shots to keep you healthy because of, fill in the blank, the water, the disease on the ground, the things that you could get. But it wasn't done there in a controlled environment with, actual doctors administering it. It was done in the desert next to a supply truck. Take the shots. You don't want to die this way. Pretty simple sell. Other weird, bizarre things that happen that I vividly remember, is the nonstop bombing of areas that were close, at least within windage range, that fall into the category of depots for chemical weapons. Okay, this occurred when we were there. We bombed the living hell out of Iraq, days and days and days and days on end. If you were back here in the United States, it probably looked like a video game. And when you were sitting in the desert in a foxhole looking across the berms into Iraq, it kind of looked like a video game. But that doesn't change the fact that in my memory, in my recollection, we had no less than 7 chemical detectors, alarms, signal. Every single time this happens, you have to achieve MOP level. MOP level 4 is the highest, where you're completely covered head to toe. But you had to achieve a certain degree of mission-oriented posture, or MOP. You have chemical alarms going off, and naturally you don the gear and you do the deal. In every single instance, we were told that it was a false alarm. Every single instance, we were told to stand down, and whatever level of protection we were at, there was no threat because it was a false alarm. And go ahead and go back into your regular battlefield uniforms, your BDUs, or whatever the case was. Put the equipment that obviously wasn't exposed to any kind of an issue back into your equipment holder. In the case of a gas mask, it went on a hip holder. In the case of your mission-oriented posture gear, it went just back into a bag and you used it later. Even though once you tear the bag open, it has a very definite shelf life because the charcoal filters want to degrade rather quickly. Regardless, is if any of these false alarms were accurate, your equipment was contaminated. You could not use it any longer. You certainly didn't take it off barehanded and put it back into its little packages to use again later. So when false alarm number 4 came along and you're grabbing this stuff thinking full well that there's no contamination problem there because the last one was a false alarm, if any one of these were not a false alarm, then guess what? You're completely and utterly contaminated. Anthrax, botulism. Well, guess what? A lot of people didn't get that. Nobody got that, at least in my unit, or had symptoms of it, because we were all sporting the brand new shiny vaccines given to us by the government, promising us that even though they weren't fully tested, they weren't approved by the FDA, that there was plenty of support that showed that they were going to be absolutely harmless to us down the road. Very bizarre, that little segment of my time in the Gulf War. Another thing that was very bizarre. And standard practice, I should say, probably even to this day, I don't know, I've been out for 2 decades. The burning of human waste, time-honored tradition, joke about it. If you screwed up, you got that kind of duty. You take half or a third 55-gallon drum cans that were cut, that were filled with human waste. You mix this with a mixture of, I believe, if memory serves, 50% diesel and 50% MoGas, and MoGas was just your uh, regular gas you'd put into your car engine or unleaded engine. You lit it ablaze, and you sat there with a tent stake, a big aluminum tent stake, and you stored this waste, this human waste, for hours and hours and hours while it burned down, a little crust at a time, and the whole time you're covered in this ashes of crap, basically, and you're inhaling it. Now, there was really high tech uh, ways to protect yourself. You had a bandana you could tie over your face, but you're in the middle of the desert, and sometimes over 100 plus degrees, and that bandana, more not likely than not, ended up on your forehead to try to prevent sweat from dripping in your eyes. You just did your best to stand out of the smoke. That happened to everybody, every at least grunt, which I would have categorized myself as. We all did that. Keep in mind, our unit we deployed from Germany. We lived in the desert for 9 months. 9 months. Now, we weren't living in a barracks. We weren't living in trailers. We were living in tents. Some cases, we were just living on our track vehicles. Every time there was a stop of any substantial time, latrines were built, cans were inserted, people did their business, and some poor idiot had to stand there and burn it. We know now it's very, very toxic. And in 2014, 2013, the VA has started to realize that people got sick and it was long term, and sometimes it didn't show up for years and years. I did that. I did it on more than one occasion. I was assigned to that duty. Sometimes for just it was my turn, sometimes because I was a little too much of a smartass, or whatever the case was. Punishment. That was not necessarily bizarre, but certainly something that stood out in my mind. Another thing that stood out in my mind, going into Kuwait and then back into Iraq, the time spent in Kuwait, especially the times spent traveling through zones that were lit ablaze with Kuwaiti oil wells. And we're not talking 10 or 20, we're talking hundreds, thousands of wells that were alight. We're talking about the middle of the day in the desert, sun shining as bright as can be in that region of the world. You don't see the sun. You see a hazy glow. You have very bizarre ash falling on your skin constantly, nonstop. Same thing falling in your equipment. And again, we had the high-tech equipment, the bandanas, to cover our intake of this. I don't think it was ever sold to us that this was healthy. And, everybody had common sense. You don't want to sit there and breathe in ash, but inevitably hundreds of thousands of troops ran through this. And in some cases, like in mine, it wasn't for an hour or 2 hours. It was days, weeks, and months we were exposed to this. Again, the same regions where it was known that chemical weapons were being stockpiled, claims that it was never used in an offensive manner against U.S. troops, but you could call it a friendly fire type of situation if we were blowing the hell out of these facilities and it was setting off false alarms on detectors. So certainly things that stand out in my mind that were not. It didn't seem right to me at the time, but let's keep in mind I was 19 years old. My biggest goal at that point in time, especially when we were in Iraq, especially when we moved into Kuwait, and we're looking at oil fields aflame. We're looking at the end of the 100-Year War. We traveled the Al-Khafji Highway and saw the thousands and thousands and thousands of dead Iraqis, retreating Iraqis out of Kuwait. There was one thing on my mind, and it was getting the hell out of there. I wanted out of Iraq. I wanted out of Kuwait. I wanted out of that region of the world. It was then, and I probably have to say I have the same opinion now, a cesspool that for no amount of money I would go back to. And in fact, at that time, through a friend's acquaintance, family member who owned a construction company that got a contract to go back into Kuwait and help rebuild, you as a private or specialist or sergeant, you could have went back into Kuwait and lived there for a year and earned $100,000 tax-free as a laborer. And I don't know anybody that took him up on that. A lot of folks came over from the U.S. for, if you're out of country, I think it was $50,000 or $60,000. A lot of money. I mean, we're talking the early '90s, a lot of money. I wouldn't do it then. I wouldn't do it for a million then. I wouldn't do it for a million now. It was horrific. It was horrible. The conditions were ridiculous. We did roll back into Saudi Arabia. We stayed at a little pleasure, whatever, resort for several weeks, and at that point in time, we had trailers with air conditioning, almost back into some kind of normal life. Shipped back to Germany, and the rest of my tour was spent. My time ended actually in Iraq, and I was ended up, of course, extending to finish that operation and then get back to Germany. None of the time thinking that ever I would be plagued by any kind of a condition. So fast forward, and a lot of people that are going to listen to this are going to think, nope, it has nothing to do with what you went through there. But please, form your opinion until I'm done. Okay? Since my time in the military, I have been an absolute fanatic when it comes to staying fit. Consistent runner. And when I mean consistent, I'm talking 35, 40 miles a week, every single week for years and years and years. Consistent long distance runner, multiple 26-mile marathons, multiple 20-mile plus endurance runs into the mountains. And I can't even count the number of 5K, 10K, half marathon t-shirts that I have hanging or folded up. So, it's not getting fat, it's not eating bad food, it's not drinking. I don't drink at all. My point is this: I've lived a clean, decent lifestyle, at least in my opinion. 3 years ago, I developed overnight almost asthma. At least it was diagnosed as asthma. It ended up leading to all kinds of CAT scans that showed deviated septum in my nose, which is not a big deal. That happened from boxing time, nose broken, but my sinuses were completely closed, and it was told to me that I needed to get sinus surgery, which I did. And now, please keep in mind, at this time, I was doing Wide Awake News Radio. I was doing the website. I was on the Rinse Radio Network, and I had countless people tell me, literally, probably 100 emails on the topic of you should look into the Gulf War syndrome. But even I, just describing to you the things that I knew happened down there that just weren't right, was reluctant to believe that my condition was a result of that time in service. So I spent 3 years, and I don't even know how many thousands of dollars have been spent on my behalf, either directly out of my pocket or via my insurance company. I'm going to call it $100,000 just to be conservative, on a surgery, on follow-up, on asthma treatment, on emergency room visits, on emergency urgent care visits, on medication, one doctor to another. Doing the route that I thought was the route I should take, which is private sector. Private problem, asthma, developed later in life, exercise-induced asthma. Okay, I'm believing the hype from all of it, and I'm spending my money to do it, and not trying to draw a connection to the military or my military service or the Veterans Administration. So this goes on and fails consistently for 3 years, to the point that my asthma doctor, my asthma specialist, not a general practitioner, his whole world for over 20 years has been practicing medicine, looking at asthma and other respiratory disease, to the point where 2 months ago, roughly 2 months ago, it's a little bit less than that, upon visiting him the day after an ambulance had to take me from my home to the emergency room because I had an attack that was so severe that I couldn't pick up the phone, I couldn't get out of a 4-point stance on the floor, because if I did, I instantly passed out. Thank God my son was here, and he made the call, and the ambulance got me up there, and they loaded me with all kinds of steroids, oral and intravenous, and we got it under control multiple hours later. And after that incident, I went into my primary physician for asthma, and he said, I don't know what you have. I don't know what this is. I've run out of options. We've done everything, including CAT scans, including countless X-rays. From my belly button to my head has been the there's more video on this than there is the moon landing. So when I have a 20-year specialist telling me that, and I talk to him about the Gulf War, and he's very, very, very peripheral knowledge of the Gulf War syndrome, and at that time he agreed to help me with this process. Again, this is after giving 2 years and $100,000 to the system that I thought that this problem belonged to, which is just life in general. I'm not trying to cut a fat payday because of my service in the military. Well, I sat in this house last night, 24 hours ago, almost as I record this, it's 1 a.m. And I'm not asleep right now because I'm literally terrified to lay down. Why? Well, because last night I went through another episode. Unfortunately, this time my child is not here. He's over at his mother's house. Um, and I had an asthma attack that started as any asthma attack does. And for those of you who have asthma, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. Woke me out of my sleep at 1 in the morning, and typically I could get an attack under control either with a simple puffer, this one that I coolly camouflaged. Um, we'll bring it under control. Typically 2 or 3 puffs. Bring it under control. I'll stay up for a half hour, make sure that it's back to normal, and then I'm off to bed. Really bad case scenario, I have a backstock of prednisone, which is an oral cortical steroid that is a little more effective. It just eliminates any inflammation just about period in your body. It takes about 2 hours to kick in, and that'll be effective. When you have one that goes out of control or is not able to control, then you have problems. You have very, very big problems. I've been through it with the ambulance ride to the emergency room. Last night was the second time, but since I had been through it before, I'm a student of what's happening to me, and I understand the procedure of what they were going to do when I got there. So I kind of developed my own little procedure if I ever went into one of these super attacks again. I nebulized twice, to little effect. After 30 minutes, I popped 60 milligrams of prednisone, usually an hour to 2 hours to kick in. It got consistently worse rapidly, even with a nebulizer and the prednisone, which understandably had not had enough time to work its full effect. It got to the point where my decision was, okay, I'm going to drive myself, because at that time I was still functioning to that point, to the emergency room, and I'm going to go in there and have doctors at least have the comfort that medical professionals were around me, and I was hooked up to machines that were going to go batshit crazy if my breathing completely stopped. Well, I decided before I was going to do that, because it was rapidly deteriorating, that I would inject myself with a EpiPen, because that is one treatment regimen or one treatment solution that people under asthma attack can take advantage of. Unfortunately, what I didn't realize, let me strike that. I've had epinephrine before given to me in a clinical setting. Giant difference when you get it in a clinical setting, doctor around you, monitoring you. You have no anxiety that this is completely out of control, especially when a doctor's telling you it's going to kick in. Don't worry about it. Completely different scenario when you're sitting at the end of a 4-hour asthma attack that at this point has you on your hands and knees. At least in my case, some asthma sufferers have to be in a 3-point stance. I end up on all fours because it's the only way I can expel air and intake air. When I jabbed myself with the EpiPen, it immediately raised my heart rate from a controlled, through breathing techniques, roughly around 110 beats per minute, which I know is still high, but you're in a very severe asthma attack. One of your goals is to maintain calm, to do all you can do to maintain calm, because anxiety or panic, it greatly increases the effect of or the intensity of your attack. I didn't take that into consideration, and my heart rate jumped to roughly probably 200 beats per minute on the epinephrine, even though it's a limited period of time. And that's when all ability to maintain calm turned into an all-out panic attack. And that compounded, excuse me, let's call it the clinical name. I call it a panic attack because you panic, but doctors call it an anxiety attack because you're full of anxiety. That led to me completely unable to do anything other than crawl to my cell phone, hit 911, and get some paramedics over here. Um, honestly, uh, honestly, with my military background, serving in a combat zone, being shot at, seeing people killed, having chemical detectors go off, taking experimental drugs, looking at carnage that is so horrific it blacks out the sky, looking at carnage created by the United States, it's thousands and thousands of dead people. Very, very anxious times, okay? A lot of anxiety in that time period. The the that is not even in comparison, not even a blip on the radar compared to the anxiety you feel when you feel life slipping away because you are trying everything you can to breathe and you cannot. Okay, so uh, by the time I get to the hospital, the measures I took 2 hours earlier, including prednisone, were starting to kick in. I knew I wasn't going to die. Anxiety level dropped. 3 or 4 hours later, I was able to leave. Unfortunately, I'm back on now a big fat regimen of prednisone that will prevent any kind of attack, but it's also, it'll make me blind in a few years. It'll soften my bones. It'll make me weak, thin-skinned, and it's certainly something you don't want to be on, but you'll take that if the alternative is to die on your kitchen floor. So there's my little what are we at now? 26-minute horror story. Told you it was going to be a long one. Uh, of what I've went through. So I have a very close family member who's fairly high up in the VA, and with changes and more recognition by the Veterans Administration and the government on the validity of Gulf War syndrome, I am taking full advantage because I truly believe at this point in time, when I have professionals that I trust, doctors telling me, we don't know what you got. We don't know. It treats somewhat like asthma. It looks somewhat like asthma, but it ain't. And I'm going after 3 years and scores of thousands of dollars coming out of my pocket to do this, literally bringing this family to the edge of easily could push us into the edge of bankruptcy at some point. Um, I'm going through the route of the Veterans Administration. I do have, like I said, I have a close family member that works there, so I have the benefit of knowing how to do this and not take years to get it done. And I will share that with you guys in a later video. If you're a veteran, if you want to file the claim, and you're looking at a daunting backload of 600 plus thousand, and in some cases your claim is going to take 180 days, a year, 2 years, longer in some cases. And if you leave it in the hands of the Veterans Administration, of what they're going to dig into and find in order to validate your claim, you are really leaving a lot of potential help that you deserve on the table. So going forward in future videos, in the not too distant future videos, I will catalog and I will chronicle every step of this process. I'll tell you right now, the process that we're using is a fully developed claim. And quickly to explain that, if you're a veteran returning from Afghanistan and a year later you want to make a claim because you suffered an injury when you were there and it's giving you problems now, or you have tinnitus, whatever the case may be, and you walk into a VA and you say, I have a claim and I want to file a claim, and you put it in the hands of that individual, they have to do all the legwork, and that claim is going to take a very, 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 very long time. If you do a fully developed claim, you do the paperwork, you do the legwork, you go to the doctors, and you have them write opinions. And that type of a claim receives a pass right to the front of the line ahead of all the other ones who don't have a a fully developed claim. Obviously, there's reasons for that. The greediest reason I can think of on the part of VA is you have individuals that have quotas, and quotas have to be met if you want to go to the next GS level. So what are you going to do? Are you going to immediately work on a claim that is not going to show results for you in your quota making for 2 years? Or are you going to take this guy's work that's done, you spend a few days validating information, and within 2 to 3 months, you have a fully developed case that has been taken from start to finish under your initials that is completely done. So there's a motivating reason why fully developed claims go to the front of the line. If you're interested in that, look for VA videos on this channel coming forth in the future. But that at 30 minutes, I'm going to end my experience and the reasons why I'm pushing through the VA system now. I'll also share with you what is the outcome. You know, what kind of if this claim is approved, which I have every confidence that it's going to be, what does that mean for me? What do I get out of it? You know, I will share all that information with you because I want you to know. I want you to know what the system can do and what the system can't do and what you can anticipate getting at. I'm also going to compare some of the ridiculous natures of injuries and what percentage of disability those people are considered versus other injuries. And, you know, a lot of it makes absolutely no sense. But let's face it, a lot of this is written by bureaucrats. So that's the end of my story and what I'm going to do pushing forward. Now, this could take an hour. Maybe I'll just name this Doomcast 29. But I'm going to shift now to a personal message to my friends who followed this channel forever. And even if you're not my friend who's followed this channel forever and you stumbled across it, and somehow I've kept you on the hook here for 30 minutes, if you're considering going in the military, any branch, if your motivation is money, if your motivation is because there's no other job to go do, you're not alone, because that's how this guy got into the military. I wanted my college paid for. I came from a mining town in Montana. We were not wealthy. The military gave me that promise of that education. But you need to understand what you're getting into. You need to understand that if you join the military in 2014, you're going to be in combat. You're going to go into an area of this world where people want to kill you. And in a lot of cases, many of which I pointed out on this channel, you would have that same desire to kill that invader if they came to this country. So please, weigh your decisions with the most wisdom that you can possibly muster. You know, when I joined in the late 80s, right, this was the end of the Cold War, but this nation had been just absolutely inundated with propaganda on us versus them, the evil empire versus the shining city on the hill. The patriotism that was alive and kicking then was it almost could be backed up with the reality of our global situation. A lot of people are going to argue with that. Don't argue with me on this video on that topic. We can say that at the end of the Cold War, that period of time where it was the West versus the East, you know, it would have been very easy for anybody to fall into that group of being a patriotic American and supporting our causes and believing the hype. But I'm here to tell you, as somebody who fell for it and believed that hype, who went into the military, like I said, for reasons that were more selfish, to put myself through college, I still believed the hype. I still believed that I was, you know, I was a patriot. I was serving my country, and we, as a military, would be serving in regions of the world that needed freedom, right? That needed our form of freedom, and we were going to do the right thing. And going into Iraq was the right thing. They invaded Kuwait, for Pete's sake. All right. Years and years later, I found out that it wasn't true. The hype isn't true then, and it's most certainly not true now. The only difference is it's a very much easier task to prove to you that the false patriotism that is sold to you to either join the military or, you know, allow your children to join the military is so much easier to prove that it's a lie than it was back then, that I can't think of a person's excuse or I can't think of a person's justification for moving forward with that decision. Now, there is people, we all know them, that want to grab a gun and kill somebody. Whatever kind of path you want to put behind, whatever kind of path you want to put behind that person's name, go ahead and do that now. But if you're a thinking individual, a caring human being, it's very easy to see through the lies that are being given to our men and women when they raise their hands. And I want to show you that it's very easy for the people who have coerced them into raising that hand and pledging to this country and pledging to the Constitution, and as we see in every movie we go to, pledging to the commander-in-chief. It's very easy to show that the promises they want you to make to them are not going to be promises that are kept by them to you. 600 plus thousand veterans on a backlog, 600 plus thousand men and women who are waiting to get help from the military that was more than willing to throw them into harm's way for a lie, right? To throw them into harm's way, not to promote freedom around this world, not to ensure democracy around this world, not to stop the wholesale slaughter of nations and peoples around this world. This is the reasons given to you. But you have to understand, if you don't use your own eyeballs and this computer or your computer and search for the real reasons of the cause of war, then it is going to be on you. It is going to be like it is on me right now. I live with this burden that I was duped. I don't want you to live with that burden that you were duped, especially now that there's people like me and thousands of people like me trying to wake you up to that fact. You are giving your life. You're giving your life, and you're going to be taking life of other human beings for reasons that are a lie. We are not in Iraq. We are not in Pakistan. We are not in Afghanistan. We're not in Libya. We're not in regions around this world that we're not even allowed to know we're in, for patriotic, spreading freedom and democracy around the world. It is a bold-faced lie. And people like John McCain and people like the war hawk Williams, Lindsey Graham, will have you believe that we're doing God's work. I don't believe that for 1 second, because at the end of the day, at the end of these results of these conflicts, and when we look in these nations, we see carnage and death and destabilization. And we see nations that were once thriving and pushing towards a prosperous, highly developed technological nation turned into the Stone Age. And at the end of this, we see the corporations who have become ridiculously wealthy prosecuting war, ridiculously wealthy stealing the future of this nation in order so that they can feather their profits now, in a lot of cases in private contracting mercenaries companies. We see the oil companies lined up in the case of Libya to bet on the best contracts to use the transfer facilities inside of Libya. This war on terror is like all the other wars that we have been sold over the years. The war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on crime. Look, failures, every one of them, but it's not failures because we, the American people, are failures. It's failures because the people who sold them to us sold us a plan, and the plan that they sold us was a lie, complete and simple. Their plan, their agenda, was a complete and total success. You have the war on drugs. It's the most profitable chunk of the too big to fail institution's business. They make billions and billions of dollars laundering drug money. There is no war on drugs that is an agenda to wipe it off, to eradicate drugs as a problem in this country. War on poverty, seriously, have you looked around? 50 million people on food stamps, homeless people everywhere. We have a nation that the middle class is just absolutely being devastated. We have the largest gulf between the wealthy and the have-nots that this country has ever seen. So the war on poverty is exact. That's a complete and total flipping of the script of what it is. It's the war on the middle class. It's the war on the ability to achieve and obtain the American dream. It's the war on your financial future to put it into the hands of very few. You have to use your own mind. You have to use your own mind to determine what your path is going to be going forward. And of course, I'm talking to men, women of coming in military age, and the parents of men and women coming into military age. I know the exact statistics of the folks who listen to this channel. I know who you are, right? Not like the NSA does, but I know the demographic that you fall in. 75% of you, 70 to 75% are men. So obviously the other balance is women. Most of you, are over 35 years old, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of you that are 17, 18, 19 years old. You're still in the prime military age, and I implore you, you know, I'm not saying you don't follow your heart. If your heart is to pick up a gun and go serve Halliburton, if your heart is telling you that it's time to go destabilize the regions of the world so the corporatocracy continue to have unbelievable influence over this nation and this planet and to destroy this planet, if you're compelled to do it, then follow your heart. But I ask you, before you determine that there is no other option, and you're going to sign up and go do this for financial reasons or for the fact that you just need a job, you need to look at the results of the men and women who went before you, right? Who went before you in the Gulf War, who went before you in the Vietnam War, who went before you in the Korean War. And you need to see that every war, post-World War II conflict that we have fought has benefited the rich. It has not brought peace to any one of the nations that we claim to make independent and install democracy, and it's left a world, a big part of this world, destabilized. And a destabilized world is a world that corporate special interests thrive on. This is the reason we have to have the largest military in the world. This is the reason they will blatantly tell you when you go into a theater and you watch the Navy ship scroll by and they tell you how it's a global force for good. It's a global force for good. They cut off the rest of it. Good profit for special corporate interest. This is the job you will be undertaking. This is the people you will be killing for. And this is the people that at the end of the day will let you spend decades having issues with your mental health, your physical health, before they'll even address it as a true concern or a true responsibility of this government. Please use your own brain, make a decision that is best for you, for your parents, for your family. Make a decision that is going to benefit you, because you're the only one that cares about your future. The people that you're going to raise your hand and support to fight and potentially die for, they show time and time again that they do not. Parents, I'm the parent of a 14-year-old son. He's a few years away from military age. Smartest kid I know. He's geopolitically, he's more on top of it than 99% of the people in this country. In large part because he's followed this program and what I've been doing for a long time. I implored him. I've implored him since he was 10 years old and infatuated, because I still do have things like I enjoy shooting. I enjoy tactical things because I was in the military. And he enjoys it and he appreciates it and he likes to go out and participate in that. But I'm trying to just show him that you don't have to pick up and kill for Halliburton in order to be an armed American, in order to love liberty and freedom. In fact, just the opposite is true, in my opinion. You need to be trained. You need to understand how to defend yourself, how to defend your family, tactics on how to win. You need to know how to do that to fight for this country, a fight that I believe is truly coming. Guys, if you sat through 44 minutes with me, I greatly appreciate it. This is, like I said, completely unscripted, from the heart, just the experiences that I've had in the very recent past, and the things that keep me up at night, which is my son, you, your kids, going off and being sold a lie from top to bottom for For this to continue on, we are letting our country, we are participating in the dismantling of the United States of America. We're participating in the dismantling of the once freest nation on earth. We need to stand up and realize what we're doing. When we make an oath, you're making an oath to a nation, you're making an oath to a government that is not going to keep that promise to you. They're having you take an oath based on a lie. Stories are attached. Thanks for hanging out with me for so ridiculously long. I want to say congratulations to my friend and co-founder of Doomcast, Doug Owen, on the birth of their child. That's why we have not had a Doomcast out this week, but I have spoke to him tonight, and we are most certainly going to record Doomcast number 29 tomorrow, Sunday night, which will be the 24th. All right, guys, I'll put some information with this video. I greatly appreciate you hanging out with me, and we'll talk to you again soon. Stories are attached. And as always, that's all I got.